Okay, so just never mind.
It'll do.
It doesn't-
Yes.
Just realised they started recording not at the start of the track, but that's fine. So we're going to be doing a podcast, myself and Alan Sterling and Richard Taylor, on education. We hadn't really come up with the title yet, but thoughts were
The future of education.
the future of education. Yes, we're going to solve the education crisis right here, right now.
Yes, I'm going to get my
As we go.
soapbox out. Just stand on it.
20 minutes, solve all the problems. No
Yeah.
problem. So we kind of made a few notes and bits and pieces. Well, I think Richard made some notes and I made a couple of words and that was fine. So what did you have?
Well, main thought was that at the moment, school funding is a major issue. All the local primary schools in the UK are facing, well, and secondary, but mostly primary, are facing major funding cuts and cutbacks, and salaries of teachers are always going up. Costs of running it are going up. But numbers of pupils are staying static. So we're not getting an increase in funding, but all the costs are going up. So real world, it means that something has to be cut.
So in terms of what you're actually going to cut, though, I mean, they've obviously been trying to make schools more efficient and more effective. But in terms of what's the answer to making schools more efficient, more effective, the idea would be that you want teachers to be teaching, not doing
Admin.
admin or
Red
whatever
tape,
other
whatever.
nonsense.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of that stuff, obviously, administrators pick up on things as well. But part of the problem is that schools are getting paid, and the money they're getting in, they want to give teachers.
Yes.
And they want to be paying teachers well. Also, probably to get good teachers probably costs more than
yes. More experienced teachers
experienced
cost more.
teachers cost more. If you have a school full of just finished their degree PGCE teachers, then yes, they're probably going to cost you less, but they're not going to be able to be as effective. But it means then I guess there's a lot less money putting in towards administration and
Resources, books,
resources.
school trips,
I heard
all that.
What was it? Someone was saying to me the other day there that in Northern Ireland, at least, that now teachers have to be, was it £100 for a classroom for the whole year?
Yes.
For a class of, I guess, I don't know,
20 to 30,
25 to 30 kids. All the resources, so all their books, all their pens, all their pencils. They've got £100 for the whole year.
Yeah, it's not enough.
Seems mad.
Yeah. I think the major issue here, though, is that the class sizes are static. There's only so many in the current way that teaching education is structured that a teacher can teach to. Local primary school that I actually know the sums of, because I'm on the Board of Governors and Finance Committee, but 94% of their budget goes to teachers. So there's 6% to run the entire school. That's
94.
to teachers, to teaching staff. The 6% then goes to so that's including classroom assistants, but the cleaner comes out of the 6% that's left, as does the oil, the electricity, everything else is out of that 6%. And this is why everyone's running at a deficit, because...
But surely then that means that if you were to increase a school's budget by 6%, suddenly you've doubled the amount of money they have for resources.
Correct. Yes.
But
the problem is they give you they'll increase the budget slightly,
Yeah.
but teachers will all get a 1% pay rise, which sounds terrible from the teacher's perspective. It's a very small pay rise. But cumulatively, with all the teachers getting a pay rise, suddenly you're at 97% of your money go to teachers, which we did find a couple of years ago. So
that's insane.
So my only thoughts when we came to do this, the future of it, is we have to find a way to increase the class sizes, or get a way to get a teacher to teach to more people, which is where our previous discussion on how do we use technology to actually address the class size issue.
Yeah, so I guess that was one thing that we chatted about before. We were talking about how do you reach more kids in a classroom, and one of those approaches is a bit more of like I guess either self-led or kind of blended learning type approach, where kids, maybe not so much primary school level, I guess they're starting to implement that a bit, but what they have is, the teacher will do their, I guess, stand up and do their kind of introduction bit or their
aims and objectives,
quick run through stuff, and then the kids get to go off and they can either choose an activity or go in with a group or whatever, and I guess they do those particular things that is their learning. So in
Yeah.
primary schools, they're doing, so play-based learning. So the teacher will stand up and they'll go, right, we're going to do play-based learning. But then the child will either be put in a group or will choose a group or whatever to go into to do that activity. That process of being able to kind of split them up into those groups then allows them to have more, I guess, either self-led or group-led
group-led interaction
learning
with each other. And,
with each other, which allows the teacher then to be more effective in terms of putting that across the class. If you take that to the next level, so not primary school level, so we're talking, well, maybe not secondary school, but further education, potentially higher education,
yes,
you're looking at blended learning. So we've got a classroom where either a teacher or lecturer potentially stands up, gives a 20-minute talk or lecture, whatever, and then the students are put into either groups or workshops or whatever, where they can then run with an activity and I guess just self-led or group-led in that process.
And that reinforces the learning that the teachers put in. My thoughts there are, I mean, if we throw this out to the extreme of blended learning, could we see a future where we have a call centre where we recruit the best teachers in the country and they do the 20-minute teaching bit, and in our schools, as they stand at current, we don't have teachers. We have equivalent of classroom assistants who effectively, the kids all sit with their VR goggles on, watching the teacher, and then the classroom assistant takes over to do the group stuff. Effectively, you're paying someone to supervise the activity the teacher has talked about. And would that actually work?
I don't think, because the problem we have with that one is that, as if you talk to any teacher, my wife's a teacher, so I know these things, is that whenever you're talking about teaching in that perspective, teachers aren't lecturers.
Yes.
They are there, they are, beside the child or, older student, whatever, walking them through it, asking them questions, interacting with them. And that is teaching as opposed to lecturing. Yeah. In the blended learning approach at lecturing level, that is a possibility. In fact, years ago we saw the Stanford lectures.
Yes, on iOS development.
Stuff like that there, where the guy just recorded his lectures and the student could watch those back at any point. So there wasn't necessarily any need for them to be in the lecture theatre. Yeah. They could literally just be, watching that in their own time in a lab or on their own computer, whatever. They can watch the lectures. The important bit for them is then getting into the lab, the group work, the interaction, the discussion, whatever, those bits. At that kind of level, at the degree level, that works because the lecturer hopefully doesn't need to be present for the discussion and the interaction, the group work, all those kinds of stuff. As long as they've kind of set the work, they've given the lecture, that works. It doesn't work necessarily at the primary school level because kids haven't learnt that level of self-direction at that point.
Yes.
So the question is then, can you offset some of the teaching bit? Let's say the bit that the teachers stand up and do their talk at the start. Can you offset that into another resource, either a video or a virtual session or something like that there, to then allow teachers to do the teaching bit, the interacting,
So maybe we need to flip the current school day on its head and say that actually perhaps homework should be during the day, and in the evening you should be watching here's what we're going to cover tomorrow, overview by the teacher. And then you come in and actually do it. So you're actually your homework will be to watch a 1-hour video on the topic overviews, the teacher imparting. So you want about an eighth of your time, 1 to 8, I think it is what I'm trying to remember my teacher training days, 1 to 8. So you should talk for 1/8 of the time, and for 7/8 of the time, the pupils should be doing their own stuff. Yeah. In an ideal world, I doubt there's many classrooms where that happens. But
no, probably not. I get the one thing I was thinking though, whenever you were saying that, is about the 1 hour of homework, because I know that's another thing that we chatted about briefly was obviously the whole. Should we have homework at all?
Should we get rid of it?
should kids be, hitting the end of their day and just using that as non-structured learning time, which essentially is what a lot of the, I guess, kind of some of the Scandinavian education
Yes.
systems are
Yeah.
starting to model a bit more, is that they have a very short learning day in structured learning,
Yeah.
and they encourage the kids to go off home and, learn in their own kind
Go
of
ice
environments,
skating and do all the extra.
all the things that they do as
Mhm.
kids, and learn that way. And then whenever they're trying to obviously do the structured learning, they try to integrate things that the kids then have been using outside of the
Yeah.
structured learning to, I guess, increase the effectiveness of
Mhm.
that learning. Now, obviously, Finland and whatnot, they are at the minute, I think, within the top 3, top 4, something
world,
like that,
Yes.
of the world in terms of education. I was doing a quick look there because it was one of the few things I did look up. Was the what's the Center on International Education Benchmarking?
Mhm.
So this was one of the sites that we looked up at, and yes, Finland rate, I think Finland in there as looks like about 3rd. Only outmatched by Canada and Estonia. Now we'll get onto Estonia because
Yeah.
that's one that we can obviously have a quick chat on Estonia
What are they doing right?
briefly, because I know that also you're an e-citizen of Estonia
Yes,
yourself.
that
So,
helps. Yeah.
but some things they're doing. But yes, so Finland, I guess, are taking that approach of shorter learning days and more time for kids to learn,
Mhm.
and for some,
Yeah.
in some respect. And I guess that seems to be working. They're producing a very high caliber of educated students at the end of their
Yeah.
their, what do you call it? Not voluntary learning. The
Yeah.
fixed period.
mandatory learning.
Mandatory. Their
Yes.
mandatory learning period. By the time they get into the end of their mandatory learning period, they have a very high caliber of students that are coming out in the likes of Finland and stuff as well.
Mhm.
So is that an approach? Do you cut the structured learning, increase the
Play.
play
Well, whatever you want
at
to call
that
it.
level? How do you do that at like further education and higher education level?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, for example, Leeds Open Day. I was just at Leeds University
Yeah.
Open Day, and what was illustrated was a computer science BSc honours degree has 18 hours per week of face-to-face learning. Let's call it that.
Which is nothing, really.
Which is very little in your week if you think that a work week is 37.5 hours, and even that isn't
Yeah.
regarded as that many hours in a week.
18 hours, primary school kids do that in 3 days.
Yes. So why is it that the further we go up the education system, less hours are more productive? Is it the resources that are thrown at it? Is it the fact that we're now paying £9,000 a year fees? Does this have a correlation on technology? For example, at Leeds, every lecture is live streamed and recorded. So you can go back at any point and re-watch it. And is this a key of reinforcing that learning?
Now, is that included, as in if the student goes and watches that hour lecture, is that technically included in their 18 hours?
Included in 18 hours. So they could live stream this potentially to 10 universities, the one recorded lecture, and for higher
Is the-
education, this might work.
Is the expectation then that they're going to spend another 18 hours in their own
Self-study and the rest, yes.
Yeah.
Minimum of 30, I think they wanted, but we all know it. I mean, in first year, maybe an hour a week of self-study,
Yeah.
7 hours a week of studying the
some
pub.
students will obviously have less than others.
This module is all about beer.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Although there are degrees on beer, but
Yeah.
that would be an interesting one to look at. So in terms of then, excuse me, in terms of the structured approach versus the non-structured approach, the 18 hours would essentially
Be structured.
be structured with maybe another 18 hours unstructured. In the same way, do you lean that more? So if in primary school we were saying, well, if we cut that down from 6 hours a day in school to 4 hours a day in school, do you do the same at the university level where they're suddenly going from 18 hours to 12 hours?
Yeah.
And then they're expected to have more self-study, self-guided learning?
Yeah.
Because you would expect by that stage that obviously as students mature, they would be able to direct self-study themselves more, which potentially is a good thing because as we know with students who have come in here, that some of them are coming in and expecting to be directed,
Yeah.
told what to do. Maybe if they were doing more of the self-directed stuff earlier, So we're starting earlier in primary
Yeah.
school. We start that earlier in secondary school. They have, again,
More experience of that.
more self-directed time.
Yeah.
By the time they get to university, they have masses amount of self-directed time and
they can cope with it.
a 1 hour lecture a day,
Yes.
so 6
Yeah.
hours, or something like that in terms of lectures. And then the rest is self-guided, either by going and looking
Online
at videos,
resources,
online resources, doing group work, doing project work, whatever that is. It means then that potentially by the time they get to this stage, the work stage, they can essentially do 100% self-guided in terms of what their activities and stuff
That'd be your
actually
dream
have to do.
employee.
Well, yeah,
I identified I didn't know how to do this. I'm going to go and find it out. I'm going to research it, learn it, and I'm going to come in and do it.
Yeah.
And that's every employer's dream, isn't it? That you raise a sort of a generation of problem solvers
Yes.
that come in and actually think on their feet for themselves.
Which is what you're aiming for, because that at the minute is the one thing that which we have found is like gold dust.
Yeah.
Is that if you've got a student coming in here and saying, do you know what, give me a problem, I'll figure out how to solve it.
Yes.
As opposed to the student coming in here and
They're
going,
wonderful.
what do you want me to do? I'm not really sure how to do that. Can you tell me how to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Spoon feeding.
Yeah. And you do find that obviously if they've spent maybe a year here, that by the time they've finished, they are starting to get to the stage where you could say to them, look, can you do this? And they'll be able to go off and do that. But, if you could get them to that stage before they were at the work environment level, then your efficiency is going to increase hugely. And I guess that goes on then into adult learning as well, so CPD and stuff like that. If you have a person who's coming in who's motivated and
To improve themselves.
educated to be able to know how to improve things themselves, and also has a desire and a motivation to do that, although that's probably a different issue altogether,
Yeah.
is that you could potentially have someone who's educated and knows how to do self-directed learning, but is just not motivated to do self-directed learning.
So how do you motivate them? Is money a motivator? Going back to Estonia, I've been
Yes,
typing away and researching. So they've got 3 different types of education. They have general education, vocational education, and hobby education.
Okay.
Now, effectively, I think this is our similar sort of thing. I mean, we will have a whole podcast on, are our schools failing the least academic pupils? Instead of, saying you must all go to university, should we actually be saying, well, actually, we have a shortage of bricklayers, plumbers, electricians, trades we have a major shortage of. Why are we pushing everyone to university?
Yeah.
So vocational. But yeah, that's another whole podcast. Hobby education is an interesting one. I think we'll have to do
But on
podcast
Estonia,
on
so
that.
this is one thing that I have to ask, obviously. You being a wonderful e-citizen of Estonia, whenever you went to visit, you found that in terms of their technological
advancement.
Advanced stuff, or just the utilization of technology within at least the sectors that you were involved with, was hugely increased
Advanced compared to here,
and pushed on compared to here. Assumably, they're doing something similar within education. They're trying to push technology. So there's a number of things that we can chat about, obviously, with technology. I think it's the Alta schools as well.
Yep.
So lots of different ways of using technology within classroom settings to, again, hopefully try and increase, like we're saying, the ability for a class to be much, much larger.
Yes.
Or the ability for one teacher to address, maybe not necessarily a class, but for one teacher to be able to have effect on many more kids.
Yes.
Without obviously being overworked.
Snowed under by
underpaid,
marking. Yes.
and all that, yes.
Yes.
So I guess with the implementation of technology, the ability for us to allow children to self-direct a bit more, that allows them, I guess, to create, in some cases, like I think with the Alta schools, they are trying to allow the child to create their own scheme of work, their own curriculum, essentially. Now, obviously, it's built up of lots of blocks. They have all these blocks and different types of modules and things that they can allow the kids to do. But the kids they get to choose when and where, and the technology allows the teacher to be able to do that and manage that. Because if you were to do that with an ordinary teacher at the minute and say, look, every child is going to have their own education, their own learning plan, their own stream of work, I think teachers would be tearing their hair out, because just the managing of that, having to do, 26 lesson plans,
Yes.
for every day or whatever would just be insane. It's just
It
not
wouldn't work.
manageable.
Yeah.
Whereas the technology allows teachers to do that, and they have the resources and the stuff at hand, so that when a child does decide that they say, well, I want to, I was looking at, I don't know, a globe or a world map or something last night, and they suddenly start showing a bit of interest in that because of a book they're reading or a TV show they saw or whatever, that the teacher can then go, super, right, well, have you looked at?
Yes.
And use the technology to say then, here's the module, bring in the resources, the child can then explore that topic, and the teacher doesn't have to spend all the time trying to figure out,
Yeah.
well, how am I going to let that child do that when this child's doing something else? Technology allows that to kind of happen in that process.
It's almost a library or a bank of many different ways of looking at the same curriculum. So if you said they want to learn spellings, for example, core part, I'm sure your children, same as mine,
Yep.
every day,
Spellings, arithmetic.
10 spellings,
Sorry, mental maths.
Oh, mental maths, yes.
Not arithmetic anymore.
No,
mental maths.
So the same thing, every day they're doing the same thing. But if you were to say, actually, do you know what? You love cooking, you love skateboarding, rollerblading, why not shape the sentences you're trying to spell or the grammar you're doing around your personal hobbies, but with the same words? So
Yes.
you're going to actually try to build in...
Some teachers do try and do that. Do you know when
Yes.
they're doing, I guess, sentence, literacy work, and they're trying to, write out their sentences, write out their words. The teachers, in most cases, will hopefully try to get them to write sentences that are asking questions about what the child's interested in.
And relevant to the child.
And relevant to the child, at which point then they're more likely to, give longer sentences as
Yes.
as answers and all that kind of stuff. But yes, if you could then utilize that to do the same thing with numeracy. So suddenly, instead of everybody counting up sheep, some people are counting skateboards and some people
Yes.
are counting
Yeah.
computer games and some people are whatever. That kind of thing. That the technology again would allow that to be easily produced for a child, because a child gets to kind of almost choose their themes.
Yes.
At which point then the resources,
Mm-hmm.
that's quite advanced in terms of technology. Suddenly it's not just that the topics that your resources are covering, but your actual resources themselves
Will change.
are being customized based on the preferences of the child.
This is machine learning and AI at its finest. If we could apply that to the school curriculum to say, right, make me resources, and effectively plug in as the learner goes along. They mention a couple of keywords, or you put in their hobbies. Maybe that's as their likes and dislikes change, then your AI effectively would reproduce the materials going forward based on how
On their
they've changed.
preference. Wow, yeah.
I mean, that would be an amazing future.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things that I was looking at with the virtual assistant stuff, so Amazon have some virtual assistants that all their vocals and things like that are matched to text files.
Yes.
So if you had some form of AI machine learning developing the resources, you could actually change the text of those resources based on what the machine learning was coming out with, and that text can then be reproduced into voice, which can be matched to virtual assistant, to the point that actually,
Are we having a virtual teacher
well, yeah,
who will
essentially.
speak differently to each child? I mean, that's your VR
But
scenario.
that becomes your
Yeah.
probably not your teacher as such. That becomes the stand-up bit at the
Yes,
start,
at the start.
the kind of the talking bit, the lecture bit, or whatever
Mhm.
you're talking about, and the teachers become the purely interactive,
Yes.
social connection,
Yeah.
which, from my experience, is what most teachers actually got into teaching for.
Or, yes.
Because
they
that's
like
the
that.
bit they like doing.
Yes.
They don't like doing the resource production. They don't like
Mhm.
doing the marking. They don't like doing the admin bit of it. So as much of that as you can remove, then that allows them to do the bit that they're interested in. And if they're going to be motivated, then they're going to be more effective in terms
Mhm.
of their learning and in terms of their teaching. And that's got to be benefit. It also, again, potentially allows us to increase the numbers, as we were saying.
Yes, increase the numbers.
To have those resources put to it.
You made me think here, and just a note for any listeners, if you have children we're about to mention Santa Claus and the way Christmas letters are done. So you might put fingers over their ears or take them out of the
Before
room.
you do that, yes, Santa does exist, and he is always watching.
Yes.
But on the other side,
on the other side, there's a most wonderful thing where you can go on and get a video from the North Pole for your child, and you put their name in. Now, as an
is this
adult,
like the virtual Santa letter?
virtual Santa letter.
Yes.
Now, as an adult looking at it, you can blatantly tell that the way they cut scene on that video to go, hello, child name, Nathaniel.
Yes.
I hope you've been a good boy this year. And you can tell that they then changed the word boy to girl, and they've pieced the video together.
Just slice.
So the one, my
bits of
thought
audio.
would be that before AI takes over and does everything, you could, in theory, have a very well-qualified teacher producing materials with a very similar sort of, well, we're just going to cutscene this whole lot together, but the machine learning will do the cutscening for you
Yeah.
in real time. So every pupil will actually see something where the teacher mentions them by name in the evening as they're watching their prep video for the next day. It would be the teacher talking to them, but it wouldn't actually be. And the question is, at that age, certainly from my experience, children under about age of 9, they don't notice the cutscenes. They genuinely, it's as if it's real. It's so real that they become engrossed and start answering back. And you'll actually get, hello, Nathaniel, have you been a good boy? And he's sitting there going, yes, I have. And that level, one wonders, could you apply this to education? Take Hollywood's CGI technology and the technologies that already exist and build resources from the current curriculum so that teachers can spend more time doing the teaching.
I guess that is the key. It's the resources, because if you have enough of the resources and allow the resources to be either cut and chopped and changed, or dynamic to the point that they're almost, if we're talking about machine learning, they're almost creating themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
That you continue to increase that bank, and it's just making that bank of resources accessible to students across the board, to teachers across the board.
Countrywide system.
Yeah, which allows then the social interaction bit to happen, to allow teachers to do that without having to invest all that extra time in admin producing the resources that they just get to the point where they go, oh, do you know what? I wish Jimmy had, I wish we had something to give Jimmy that would, be tailored around, I don't know, Jimmy's into tractors. Something that would be tailored around tractors and, the mechanics of them and, how they move and what the farmer does and, all those kinds of processes. And suddenly you've got a whole bank of resources available where Jimmy's going to be really interested because they're specific to what he's interested in. And I guess that is the ultimate goal in terms of, if you've got the resources to do that and you can build the resources to do that, any environment's going to, allow that to be used efficiently and effectively. And whenever they get to the later stage then as well, degree students, all the likes of that, it's about the resources. If they've then reached that stage where they're completely self-guided, you'll find that they'll be able to use the resources and teach themselves. Essentially, a lot of the you almost get to the stage where it's like, do you need lectures?
Yes.
If you have a structured environment for students to come in. Now, this is one thing we've noticed with placement students, is that the unstructured environment of an hour lecture a day makes them really inefficient. They get to that point of like, well, I'll just get up from a lecture and then lecture's done, and they go off and they fiddle about and they maybe go do a lab or whatever for an hour and that's it. Whereas as soon as students come in here and they're into a 9 to 5, suddenly it's like, okay, well, the ones who are coming who don't know how to self-lead, they're lost between 9 and 5. Like, what am I going to do between 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock? They end up just twiddling their thumbs or, sitting...
playing Minecraft.
Whatever.
Yeah. Surfing
the internet and what have you. But if you had them to that point where you could say, right, well, you're here 9 to 5, here's the resources. If they are then self-led, they can have 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, where they could be absorbing so much information and learning so much by being self-taught and having those resources available to them at their fingertips, ready to go as they need them.
And the level of excitement that would do. I mean, it's like going down the rabbit hole, isn't it? I don't know if
totally.
you experience this as in work, where you go, wow, how can I do that in a programming language, for example, our chosen field? And then you go, wow, I didn't know I could do that. And you just dig deeper and deeper. And suddenly you find hours have passed, and you've just totally self-taught and learned without thinking, I must go and sit down and spend 3 hours. You've just done it without meaning to.
Yeah.
And if we can get kids to do that, I mean, if we could find a way for machine learning to be able to trigger that inspiration, that I love this, I want to do more of this, but while meeting the national curriculum, still have to have that in mind, and maybe that needs to be updated a little bit, but, yeah.
I guess the other thing on that is that you do find that students, once they have been here a year, and actually employees, once they've been here a year or 2 years or 3 years, they do get to that stage where actually, do you know what, if they had more time to do self-directed learning, they would actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
Do you know, obviously as they progress out of being a student into being an employee, there's more work demands come in. So, do you know, jobs, contracts, all that kind of stuff kicks in, and you get less time. But you actually start to realise that if you would prefer more time.
Yeah.
You know, self-guided learning. Do you know what I mean? At the minute, I can think of half a dozen things where I'd be like, I wish I could go and just sit down and learn how to figure that out, or go and read some stuff or watch some videos or whatever.
Yeah.
But they haven't got to that stage. At whenever they're at university or whatever. They're still kind of learning that stuff as they go. But that's another point that I wanted to bring up, and I guess we'll try and wrap up shortly, because I'm going quite a long time. But one thing I did want to address kind of briefly was that a lot of that learning to learn stuff becomes available with increased emotional intelligence. So there's one thing that's obviously getting floated about a lot at the minute is the whole EQ thing. It's the emotional intelligence stuff. Instead of, the IQ stuff, apparently, it's all fixed. Your IQ's your IQ.
Solved this, yeah.
You're as smart as you're going to be. You will not get any smarter. But emotional intelligence can be increased. So, as in, you can learn emotional intelligence. So, if kids are getting to that stage, well, okay, can we increase the level of emotional intelligence that's being taught, so that when students do get to the adult level, 18, 19, 20, they have learned enough emotional intelligence that they are already at that stage where I'm at that stage where I want to learn. I want to, instead of hitting that stage at student level and kind of going,
what do I do now?
Yeah, I can't be bothered, or, I just want to get a job, and, whatever. They're not, they haven't got that level of emotional intelligence to think about what it is that they actually want to do, what it is they want to achieve. Because that usually, from what I can see, doesn't happen until, 3-4 years into their first job.
Yes.
I
agree with that.
Can you bring that down a bit in terms of, start to have something in there that's being taught that teaches the emotional intelligence, so that when they do get to that stage, it's a lot faster transition for them to be able to go, oh, right, I'm actually in the adult world. I need to, because essentially, that's, in terms of emotional intelligence, that's what you're learning. Your emotional intelligence is essentially the learning of growing up.
Yes.
I'm learning to be an adult. That is what a lot of that stage of emotional intelligence. Now, obviously, a lot of adults get to a certain plateau with that one, and their emotional intelligence doesn't increase anymore once they get to the point of being able to, I guess, function in the world.
Yes.
They stop, increasing their emotional intelligence. They don't try to continue to learn that. And that, again, if that can kind of be continued, if that can be taught to increase that, it means then when they do end up out into the real world, they will continue to increase that emotional intelligence, the learning of that emotional intelligence as well, which hopefully, I guess, increases that ability to keep learning.
Yes.
So I guess all this to try and say that it's bringing that level of self-taught, stuff down to a level so that whenever they hit the real world, they're a lot more prepared for what's kind of going on.
Ultimately, that is the goal: is to get children into adults who love what they do jobs that they love doing, that they're inspired and passionate about, and want to know more about and learn more. They don't just go, I'm going to become a programmer and that's it. I'm never going to become a better programmer or a different language from our perspective. As you were saying that, it made me reminded of a quote from the film Accepted, where It's
I think I've seen that one.
Bartleby Gaines. He's a student who's so worried about rejection that he starts his own fake college, which I thought was rather good. But his college had no grades and no subjects. You got to choose your own subjects.
Okay.
And you got to choose when you worked. And what actually happened as a side effect of that was that everyone actually worked and learned. His sort of closing sort of speech in the whole thing was that the other schools, they're robbing the kids of their creativity and their passion. So they're so rigid and so fixed in their curriculum, and it's so unpersonalized to each child that it doesn't work. They don't follow their heart. They just play it safe. They roll over. It's quite a movie. If you want a movie about education and getting you inspired, that's the one to watch. Just a note for there's swear words in it and stuff. But most movies do.
Keep away from young children.
Keep away from young children. But if you like anything to do with education, it's a quite inspirational story of. Yeah.
Good. Well, I don't think we've quite solved the world's education crisis, but I think it's a good start, and hopefully there'll be more to come.
There will be. We haven't even touched on Minecraft schools yet.
Yes, there's one topic we've chatted about a lot, but hadn't quite got to it in this session. I think this, for now, will be quite long enough.
Yes, and we'll be back with
next time.
round 2 with Minecraft schools. Goodbye.